The paralyzed Apache woman was abandoned in a wagon until a rancher arrived. The sun rose slowly over the wide, empty land, spreading pale light across dry earth and scattered rocks. The land had seen many seasons of struggle. Wind moved gently through tall grass, and the sky held no promise of rain. In this quiet place, an Apache woman lay inside an old wooden wagon. The wagon stood still near a worn trail that few people used anymore. Its wheels were cracked and the wood was rough from age. Time seemed to have stopped around it. The woman could not move her legs. They lay still beneath a thin blanket that barely protected her from the cold night or the strong heat of the day. Her illness had taken her strength slowly. First, she had felt pain, then weakness. Then one day, her legs stopped responding at all. She remembered the fear she felt when she realized she could no longer stand. She remembered the faces of her people, full of worry and confusion. Life had already been hard for them, and now she was another burden they did not know how to carry. She had once been strong. She had walked long distances, helped gather food, and cared for children. She knew the land well and respected it deeply. But sickness does not ask permission. It enters quietly and changes everything. As days passed, her body grew weaker and the people around her grew more silent. They still gave her water and food, but their eyes often looked away. Survival had become difficult for everyone. One early morning, before the sun was fully awake, they lifted her carefully and placed her into the wagon. Their movements were gentle, but their hearts were heavy. No one said much. Words felt too painful. She understood what was happening even before the wagon started to roll. She felt the truth settle in her chest like a heavy stone. They were leaving her behind. The wagon moved slowly at first, pulled for a short distance before stopping near the trail. They gave her a small pouch of water and a piece of cloth. Someone tucked the blanket around her shoulders. She searched their faces, hoping someone would change their mind. But fear and hunger had already made the decision for them. One by one, they turned away. The sound of footsteps faded. The land grew quiet again. Now she lay alone. The sun climbed higher and the heat became strong. Flies buzzed around the wagon. Her throat felt dry and her body ached from lying still. She shifted her arms slightly, trying to ease the pain in her back. Every small movement took effort. She stared at the sky above her, watching clouds drift slowly, uncaring of her struggle. At first she cried. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not only from fear but from deep sadness. She was not angry. She understood why they had done it. Life had forced their hands. Still, understanding did not stop the pain. She whispered the names of her ancestors, hoping their spirits could hear her. She asked for strength not to escape but to endure. As hours passed, she listened carefully for sounds. The creak of a wagon wheel, the step of a horse, the call of a human voice. Each sound of the wind made her heart lift for a moment, then fall again when nothing followed. The land was wide and travelers were rare. The trail had once been busy, but now it was mostly forgotten. Her mind drifted to memories. She remembered running as a child, her feet strong against the ground. She remembered laughter around the fire at night, stories told by elders, songs carried by the wind. Those memories warmed her more than the sun ever could. They reminded her that she was more than her broken body. As night came, the temperature dropped quickly. The blanket was not enough. She pulled it closer with weak arms, shivering. The sky filled with stars, bright and endless. She had always loved the night sky. It made her feel small but also connected to something greater. She wondered if she would see another sunrise. Sleep came in short, uneasy moments. Pain woke her often. Thirst burned her throat. She took small sips from the water, careful not to drink too much at once. She knew she had to make it last, though she did not know how long she would be there. The next day came, bright and harsh. Her lips were cracked and her voice was barely a whisper. She tried to call out when she thought she heard something in the distance, but the sound faded. No one answered. Still, she did not give up. Giving up would mean letting the fear win. She spoke softly to herself, telling herself stories, repeating words of strength she had learned long ago. She reminded herself that life had value even in stillness, even in pain. She believed that as long as she breathed, there was a reason to keep going. Time lost its meaning. She could not tell how many hours had passed. The sun moved across the sky, then began its slow fall again. Her body felt heavy, but her mind stayed awake. She watched shadows stretch across the ground. She listened to the land. In that silence, she felt both very small and very brave. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet hope remained. She did not know why. She had no proof that help would come. But something within her refused to believe that this wagon was the end of her story. She held onto that feeling tightly, like a fragile flame in the dark. As the day faded and the light softened, she closed her eyes for a moment. The land was still. The wagon did not move. But far away, beyond her sight, a life was continuing. A path was forming that would one day cross hers. She did not know it yet, but the moment that would change everything was slowly drawing closer. Morning returned with a pale light that crept slowly across the land. The woman opened her eyes and realized she was still alive. For a brief moment, relief touched her heart. Then the weight of her situation settled in again. The wagon had not moved. No voices had come. The land around her looked exactly the same as the day before, wide, quiet, and uncaring. Her body felt stiff and sore. Lying in one position for so long made every part of her ache. She tried to shift again, using only her arms and shoulders. The effort left her breathing hard. Her legs remained still, like they no longer belonged to her. She had accepted this truth, but it did not make it easier. Each time she tried to move them, hope rose and fell just as quickly. The water pouch felt lighter when she lifted it. She shook it gently and heard only a small sound. Not much remained. She took a careful sip, letting it sit in her mouth before swallowing. The taste was warm, but it eased her burning throat. She told herself she must be patient. Panic would only make things worse. The sun climbed higher and heat returned quickly. The wood of the wagon grew hot under her hands. She used the edge of the blanket to cover her face, trying to protect her skin. Flies came again, drawn by stillness. She waved them away when she could, though her arms grew tired fast. She watched the trail closely. Every line of dust, every moving shadow caught her attention. Once, she thought she heard the sound of hooves. Her heart beat faster. She gathered her strength and called out. The sound that came from her mouth was weak and broken. It disappeared into the open land. No answer followed. The sound she had heard faded too. Perhaps it had only been the wind. Disappointment hurt more than the thirst. Still, she did not allow herself to sink fully into despair. She reminded herself that she had survived one night. That meant something. Survival was not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet and slow. As the day passed, her thoughts wandered again. She remembered her mother teaching her how to listen to the land. "The earth speaks," she had once said, "but only if you are still enough to hear it." Lying there now, the woman felt she understood those words in a new way. She felt the ground beneath the wagon. She felt the air change as clouds passed overhead. She listened to birds calling in the distance. Life continued, even if she could not move through it. By late afternoon, her strength faded again. Hunger twisted in her stomach, but hunger was familiar. She had known it before. Thirst was harder. Her lips cracked further and her tongue felt thick. She tried not to think about what would happen when the water ran out. Instead, she focused on the present moment, on breathing, on staying awake. Another night came. The sky darkened slowly and stars appeared one by one. Cold followed quickly. She pulled the blanket tight around her shoulders, curling her arms inward. Her body shook as the temperature dropped. Pain settled deep in her back and hips. Tears slipped quietly from her eyes, not from fear this time, but from exhaustion. She whispered words to herself again, old prayers, simple thoughts. She thanked the land for another day. She asked for strength for the next one. Sleep came and went in short pieces. Dreams mixed with memories. In one dream, she was walking again, her feet touching the earth. In another, she was calling for help, but no sound came out. When morning arrived again, she felt weaker. Her arms trembled when she tried to lift them. The water pouch was almost empty now. She knew she could not last many more days like this. The truth pressed heavily on her mind. Still, she refused to stop hoping. Hope was the one thing she could still choose. A shadow crossed the wagon near midday. Her heart jumped. She opened her eyes wide, straining to see. A bird flew past and landed nearby. She laughed softly at herself, then stopped. Even laughter took energy she could not waste. Later, she noticed something new. In the far distance, dust rose briefly, then disappeared. It was faint, but it was real. She focused all her attention on that spot. Her breath caught in her chest. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. Still, that small sign kept her alert. It reminded her that the world had not stopped turning. Her voice was nearly gone now, but she practiced forming words in her mind. If someone came, she wanted to be ready. She wanted to be seen as more than a body in a wagon. She was a woman with a story, with dignity, with a will to live. As the sun began to lower again, she felt herself slipping toward sleep. She fought it. She knew resting too deeply could be dangerous. She pinched her arm lightly, keeping herself alert. The light softened, painting the land in warm colors. It was beautiful even now. Just before night fully returned, she heard it again. This time the sound was clearer. Hooves, slow, steady, her heart pounded. She gathered everything she had left. She opened her mouth and pushed her voice out with all her strength. The sound was weak, but it was real. The hooves did not stop. Fear rushed through her. She tried again, her throat burning. The sound came out rough, barely more than air. Tears filled her eyes as she watched the shadow move along the trail, not turning toward her. Then the sound slowed. She held her breath, afraid to hope too much. The wagon remained still. The land held its silence. Somewhere nearby, something or someone had paused. She did not know yet if this moment would bring help or heartbreak. But for the first time since she was left there, the future felt close, as if it were finally leaning toward her instead of away. The sound returned, clearer this time. Hooves moved slowly on the hard ground, not rushing, not fading away. The woman's heart beat so loudly she felt it in her ears. She stared toward the trail, her eyes wide, her body completely still except for her shaking hands. Dust rose again, thicker now, and stayed in the air longer. This was not the wind. This was real. A horse came into view, tall and calm, its head lowered as it walked. On its back sat a man, broad-shouldered and steady, dressed in simple work clothes. He looked like someone who belonged to the land, not a visitor passing through. He moved with the quiet confidence of a person who spent most of his life outdoors. He had been riding home after checking his animals, following his usual path, thinking of nothing unusual at all. He almost passed the wagon. At first, he thought it was empty. Old wagons were sometimes left behind when they broke or were no longer useful. He slowed his horse slightly, his eyes drawn to the shape standing alone in such an open place. Something about it felt wrong. The trail was too quiet, the wagon too still. He turned his head just enough to look more closely. That was when he heard it. A sound so faint it could have been mistaken for the wind, a broken breath, a whisper that barely held together. He stopped his horse completely. Silence returned, thick and heavy. He listened again, holding his breath. Then he heard it once more, a human sound. He dismounted quickly but carefully, tying the horse to a nearby post. His boots touched the ground and he walked toward the wagon with slow steps. He did not call out. He did not want to frighten anyone. As he reached the side of the wagon, he saw her. She lay there, thin and still, her face pale and dry. Her eyes were open, fixed on him, filled with fear and something else he could not name right away. Hope, maybe, or disbelief. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The land seemed to pause with them. He was the first to move. "Easy," he said softly, his voice calm. "You're not alone now." Her lips trembled. She tried to speak, but only a weak sound came out. He noticed her cracked lips, her sunburned skin, the way her arms shook as she tried to lift one hand. He understood enough without words. She had been there a long time. He reached for his canteen and held it gently to her mouth. "Small sips," he said. "Take it slow." She obeyed, taking a little water at a time. Tears slid down her cheeks as she swallowed. The water brought relief, but it also released emotion she had been holding back for days. She did not try to hide it. She no longer had the strength. He waited patiently, not rushing her. When she finished, he covered her again with the blanket, adjusting it to block the sun. He looked around, taking in the empty land, the position of the wagon, the lack of supplies. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing unkind. "How long have you been here?" he asked gently. She took a breath. "I don't know," she whispered. Her voice was rough but understandable. "Days," he nodded slowly. "I'm glad I came this way today." She studied his face. There was no fear in his eyes, no judgment, only concern. That alone made her chest ache. She had prepared herself for many things, being ignored, being pitied, being treated like a problem. She had not prepared herself for simple kindness. He asked if she was hurt. She explained slowly, choosing her words carefully. She told him she could not walk, that her legs no longer moved, that she had been sick for a long time. He listened without interrupting, his attention fully on her. When she finished, he said, "All right, we'll figure this out." Those words meant more to her than he could know. Not "I can't help," not "this is too much." Just "we," he thought for a moment, then moved into action. He untied the horse and positioned it closer. He checked the wagon, testing its strength. It was old, but it could still move. Carefully, slowly, he adjusted things so the ride would be as smooth as possible. "I'm taking you with me," he said simply. "I have a place. It's not fancy, but it's safe." Fear flickered in her eyes. Change always carried risk, but staying meant certain harm. She nodded weakly. "Thank you," she whispered. He made sure she was secure before guiding the horse forward. The wagon creaked as it began to move, the sound loud in the quiet land. She felt the motion beneath her, strange after so much stillness. Each small bump sent pain through her body, but she did not complain. She focused on the fact that the land was moving again, that she was no longer stuck. The journey was slow. He stopped often to check on her, offering water, adjusting the blanket, making sure the sun did not strike her face directly. He spoke occasionally, telling her small things about the land, the weather, the animals he cared for. His voice was steady, grounding. She listened, letting the sound calm her racing thoughts. As they traveled, she felt something unfamiliar growing inside her. Not strength, her body was still weak, but trust. She did not know this man, but she sensed no danger from him. He treated her like a person, not a burden. By the time they reached his ranch, the sky was beginning to soften toward evening. A simple house stood in the distance, weathered but solid. Trees offered shade nearby. The sight made her eyes fill again, but this time the tears were quiet and warm. He guided the wagon to a stop and moved quickly to her side. "We're here," he said. She looked around, taking it in slowly. The smell of earth, the sound of animals in the distance. Life, ordinary, steady life. As he prepared to carry her inside with care, she met his eyes again. "You didn't have to stop," she said softly. He shook his head. "Yes, I did." In that moment, as the sun dipped low and the land cooled, something shifted for both of them. For her, the long wait in the wagon was finally over. For him, an ordinary day had become something else entirely. Neither of them knew what the days ahead would bring, but the path they now shared had already changed them both. The ranch was quiet and welcoming, a small place built with care rather than wealth. Simple wooden fences marked the edges, and a few horses grazed calmly in the fields. The air smelled of earth, grass, and the faint scent of wood smoke from the house. The woman took in every detail slowly, her eyes wide, noticing things she had not thought about in days. The warmth of the sun on soft grass, the movement of small birds in the trees, the steady rhythm of life continuing around her. The rancher guided her inside the house carefully. Every step was deliberate, every motion gentle. He set her down on a sturdy chair with cushions, making sure she was comfortable and safe. The room was simple but clean, with sunlight pouring through the windows and lighting up wooden floors. For the first time in days, she did not feel trapped in a harsh world. She felt seen. He gave her a small bowl of water and a piece of bread, things he had prepared before she arrived. She hesitated at first, not used to kindness, but the hunger in her stomach won. She ate slowly, each bite reminding her that she was alive, that she could still survive. The rancher sat nearby, watching her with a quiet patience. He did not rush her, did not make her feel weak. He only offered support. After she ate, he asked gently about her life, about her days before she had been abandoned. She told him small stories, not everything, but enough to show who she was. Her voice was soft and broken, but steady. He listened carefully, never interrupting, only nodding or asking questions when needed. His presence was calming. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe speaking aloud without fear of being judged or ignored. Days passed, and the rancher adapted his work to help her. He adjusted tasks so she could participate in small ways, lifting her arms to help brush a horse or feed chickens. These were tiny tasks, but they gave her a sense of purpose. She began to feel useful again, not just a person to be cared for. Each small achievement filled her with quiet pride. She realized she could still contribute, even though she could not walk. Neighbors began to notice the woman at the ranch. Some were curious, others skeptical. They whispered questions, sometimes doubting the rancher's choice, but he ignored their opinions. What mattered was not what others thought, but the life he was helping her build. Slowly, she became part of the rhythm of the ranch, her presence respected rather than pitied. Over time, the woman regained some strength in her upper body. She could lift objects, carry water, and help with small chores. Every movement was a small victory. She practiced daily, building patience and endurance. The rancher offered guidance, encouragement, and patience. They worked together quietly, learning from each other's presence. Beyond physical recovery, her spirit began to heal as well. She shared stories of her childhood, teaching the rancher about the land, the animals, and the ways of her people. He listened attentively, fascinated by her knowledge and wisdom. She felt pride in being able to pass on this knowledge, and it gave her a renewed sense of identity. She was not just a woman who had been left behind. She was a teacher, a person with stories that mattered. Evenings on the ranch became times of quiet companionship. She would sit by the window, watching the sun set behind distant hills, while he worked on simple repairs around the house. They did not need many words. The shared silence was comforting. The routine of life, steady and unhurried, gave her a sense of belonging she had not known in a long time. Challenges remained. Nights were cold and her body ached from her condition. Some days she felt despair creeping back, memories of the wagon and abandonment shadowing her mind. But the rancher was always nearby, offering comfort and support without judgment. He taught her that vulnerability was not weakness, that asking for help was a sign of strength. As weeks turned into months, trust deepened between them. She learned to rely on him without fear, and he learned the importance of patience, empathy, and understanding through her presence. Their bond was not born of romance, but of mutual respect and quiet care. Life on the ranch had given them both something unexpected, a shared connection rooted in compassion and humanity. One afternoon, while feeding the horses together, she laughed for the first time without restraint. The sound was light, unexpected, and full of life. The rancher smiled, his own heart lifting at the sound. He realized that she was not only surviving but beginning to thrive. Small victories, small joys were building a life that once seemed impossible. Through these days, she found dignity again. She learned that even in a body that could not walk, She could live fully, meaningfully, and with respect. She was no longer a person left behind in a harsh world. She was a valued member of the ranch, a friend and a teacher. Every small task, every story shared, every moment of laughter reminded her that life could still hold beauty and purpose. And so, life settled into a new rhythm. The woman learned patience, endurance, and quiet joy. The rancher learned the power of simple kindness and the impact one person could have on another's life. Together, they built a small world of safety, respect, and healing. It was not perfect, but it was enough. It was a life worth living, a story worth telling, and a future slowly opening with every passing day. The woman often thought of the wagon and the empty trail where she had been abandoned. The memory was painful, but it had become part of her story, a contrast that made her present life even brighter. She realized that she had survived because she had not given up hope, and because someone had arrived when she needed help the most. That simple act of kindness had changed everything. She looked out across the fields as the sun dipped low behind the hills, feeling the gentle wind on her face. Though her legs would never move again, she knew she had a place where she belonged. She had a home, a purpose, and the knowledge that she was not alone. The ranch had given her life again, not the life she had before, but a new life, rich with meaning and connection. And in that quiet ranch, surrounded by animals, earth, and someone who cared deeply, she understood something essential. Even the deepest wounds could heal with time, patience, and compassion. She would never forget where she had come from, but she no longer feared where she was going. Every day became a chance to live fully, even within limits, and to find joy in the small, enduring things that made life worth living. This was the life she had been given, and she embraced it fully, learning that survival was only the beginning. Healing, purpose, and dignity were what made life truly meaningful, and she was finally discovering them, one small step at a time. The days on the ranch grew steady and calm. The woman had settled into her new life with quiet strength. Her arms had grown stronger from helping with chores, carrying water, feeding animals, and assisting with small repairs. Though she could not walk, she found ways to move her body and remain useful. Each task brought her confidence. Each task reminded her that she had a place in this world. The rancher watched her with respect, never treating her as fragile but as a capable, valued partner in life. Neighbors began to notice her presence at the ranch. At first, some were curious, whispering questions about why she was there and how she had come to live with the rancher. Others were doubtful, unsure of what role she could play in daily life. But the woman did not focus on the judgments of others. She focused on living fully, even within her limits. Slowly, as neighbors saw her helping, listening, and contributing, their doubts faded. She had earned their quiet admiration, not through words, but through her actions and courage. Life on the ranch was full of small moments that mattered. She would sit by the window in the mornings, sipping water as sunlight touched the floor. She would feed the chickens, brushing them gently as they pecked the ground. She learned to care for the garden, tending plants with patient hands. She shared stories with the rancher about her people, the ways they listened to the land, and the lessons they had passed down through generations. Each story was a thread connecting her past to the present, teaching patience, observation, and respect for life. Evenings became a time of reflection. She and the rancher would sit outside, watching the sun sink behind the hills. Sometimes they spoke quietly about the day, sometimes they remained in silence. The silence was comforting. It was a language of trust and understanding. The woman had once been abandoned in a lonely wagon, left to survive on her own. Now she was surrounded by care, safety, and respect. The contrast was striking, and it reminded her how fragile and precious life could be. Her spirit healed alongside her body. She found laughter returning, small at first, then louder and freer. A soft giggle while watching the horses play, a quiet laugh while recalling memories from her childhood. These sounds were evidence of hope and renewal. The rancher smiled at her laughter, realizing that it marked the true recovery of her spirit. She was no longer simply surviving, she was living. The woman also began to teach. She instructed the rancher on small lessons about the land, how to read the wind, how to notice signs of approaching storms, how to care for animals with patience rather than force. These lessons were small, practical, but valuable. She realized that her knowledge and experience mattered, and that even without walking, she could guide and influence the life around her. Teaching gave her purpose, and purpose became a source of inner strength. Some nights memories of the wagon returned. She remembered the burning sun, the loneliness, the feeling of being forgotten. The memory was painful, but it no longer held her captive. Instead, she saw it as a reminder of how far she had come. She had survived extreme hardship. She had been left for dead and had lived. She had been ignored and now was cared for. The past no longer defined her, it strengthened her. The rancher became more than a helper, he became a friend and companion. Their relationship was built on trust, patience, and respect. He had not rescued her to feel important or to be praised. He had acted out of simple human compassion, a willingness to help someone in need. In turn, she had learned to trust again, to believe that people could be kind without expecting something in return. Their bond was quiet, steady, and deep. The ranch became her sanctuary. Every corner of it carried new memories. The smell of hay in the barn, the sound of the creek running nearby, the soft coo of birds in the trees. Each day had a rhythm, each task a meaning. She had discovered that life, even after trauma and abandonment, could hold dignity, joy, and connection. She learned to find happiness in small things, the smile of a horse, the taste of fresh bread, the warmth of sunlight on her face. Time passed, and she became fully accepted as part of the ranch. Visitors or travelers who came to the area would see her working calmly, helping animals or tending the garden. They might have been surprised at first, but they soon recognized her skill and strength. She had become more than the woman abandoned in a wagon. She was a teacher, a caretaker, a valued member of the community. Through this process, the woman learned patience, endurance, and humility. She realized that life does not always follow the path we expect, but that it is possible to create meaning even within limitations. She understood that kindness, once received, has the power to transform. A single act of compassion, the rancher stopping to help her, had changed the course of her life completely. She had been given safety, trust, and a chance to rebuild. One bright morning, she sat by the fence watching the horses graze. She felt the sun on her face and the wind in her hair. She reflected on everything that had brought her to this point. The wagon, the abandoned trail, the days of waiting alone, all of it had led her to a life of care and purpose. She smiled softly to herself, feeling gratitude that ran deep into her soul. The rancher approached and handed her a bucket of water. "Ready for the garden today?" he asked. She nodded, smiling back. The simple exchange held so much meaning. She was part of life again, not a passive observer but an active participant. Her days were full, her spirit renewed, her dignity intact. Even though she would never walk again, she had learned to rise in other ways. She had risen in spirit, in knowledge, in contribution, and in connection. Every person she met at the ranch saw not a woman broken, but a woman strong, resilient, and alive. She had found safety, home, and purpose. She had found humanity in someone who had reached out when no one else would. As the sun set that evening, painting the sky in gold and purple, the woman sat quietly, breathing deeply. She was no longer defined by the wagon or abandonment. She was defined by the life she now lived, the care she gave and received, the lessons she taught, and the trust she had learned to offer again. The rancher sat nearby, quietly watching the same sunset, and in their shared silence there was understanding, respect, and the calm of a story that had found its home. The woman knew that life could still be unpredictable, that hardship might come again. But she also knew she could endure because she had already survived what most could not imagine. She had learned the power of hope, the strength of patience, and the value of kindness. And in the quiet beauty of the ranch, surrounded by life, work, and care, she finally felt at peace. Her story, once one of abandonment and fear, had transformed into a story of resilience, dignity, and human compassion. It was a story that would live on quietly in the land, in the rancher's eyes, in the animals she cared for, and in her own heart. The wagon was behind her now, a painful memory, but one that made the life she had found even more precious. In the soft glow of the evening, she whispered a quiet thank you to the land, to life, and most of all, to the person who had arrived when hope seemed impossible. She had been abandoned once, but she was never truly alone again. And that truth filled her with a calm, steady joy that would remain for the rest of her days.